I was halfway up a ladder when I realized my morning had already gone sideways, you know what I mean? 1 second I was just another guy doing his job, paintbrush in hand. Sun, barely up Quiet Street, the kind of quiet that only exists in expensive neighborhoods. And the next second, I heard a voice from below saying, real calm, real sharp, "Sir, step down from that ladder and keep your hands where I can see them." 3 sentences into the day, and I knew this wasn't about paint anymore. My name's Marcus Hale, and I've been painting houses for a long time, long enough that the work becomes muscle memory. You tape, you sand, you cut clean lines, you don't rush. I run my own company, Harborline Coating's been doing it over a decade. Licensed, insured contracts, signed the whole boring legal package nobody ever cares about until suddenly they care a lot. That morning I was working on a big white colonial in a coastal town outside Boston, the kind of place where lawns look like magazine covers and nobody parks on the street unless they belong there. I'd been there since early morning, ladder steady tarp, laid out clean truck, parked neat with my logo on the door, and honestly, I was enjoying the quiet. I like starting early because people leave you alone, or at least that's what I used to think. The voice belonged to a woman standing in the driveway like she owned it. Sunglasses on arms, crossed phone already in her hand. She didn't look confused. She didn't look curious. She looked decided. I looked down and said, calm as I could, "I'm just painting the house. The owners hired me." And she didn't even blink, just said, "I've already called the authorities." Not the police, not the homeowners, the authorities. That word hit different. Here's the thing people don't always get. Moments like that don't start at zero. They start way earlier, years earlier. I grew up watching my dad come home, tired, paint under his nails, grease on his hands, telling me the same lesson in different ways. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. You earn silence by being flawless. My grandfather mixed cement in the 50s because unions wouldn't let him do more. My dad wired houses in the 80s when banks wouldn't lend to guys like him. I learned early that working with your hands was honest, but being judged for it came free. So when that woman said she'd called someone on me, I didn't panic. I recognized it. Yeah, that happened. She'd arrived in a black SUV and parked across the street, watched me for a minute before getting out. I noticed, but I didn't react. People stare sometimes. Then she took out her phone and started snapping pictures. Me on the ladder, the truck, zoomed in on the license plate like she was building a case. No hello, no excuse me, just evidence collection. Then she crossed the street and stepped right into the driveway like it was hers and asked, "What are you doing here?" I explained, short, professional. I could feel she wasn't listening to understand she was listening to find a problem. She asked if I was alone. I said yes, my crew was finishing another job. I had permission to work today. She shook her head and said, "That doesn't seem right. I've lived here a long time. I know who belongs." That word belongs landed heavy. I climbed down a rung, hands visible, voice steady. "I have a contract, permits, everything's legal." She smiled tight and thin and said, "Legal. We've had problems with illegal labor around here. I'm not letting that happen again." I told her I was a citizen, born here, owned the company. She looked at me like I'd said something cute and replied, "Everyone says that." Then she dialed her phone loud enough for me to hear every word. "I'd like to report a suspicious worker, a man doing construction without supervision. I don't recognize him. He doesn't look like he belongs here. Maybe undocumented, maybe Hispanic, maybe black, hard to tell, but definitely not one of us." I stood there with my jaw tight, breathing slow. I didn't interrupt. I pulled out my phone and started recording, said out loud for my safety. She shrugged and said, "Go ahead. The truth doesn't mind cameras." Funny thing is, she was right, just not in the way she thought. About 10 minutes later, the homeowners came flying into their own driveway, faces red, voices already raised. The woman jumped out and said, "What did you just do?" The neighbor said she was protecting the street. The homeowner pointed at me and said, "That's my contractor. I hired him. He's licensed. He's been working here all week." The neighbor replied, "Well, how was I supposed to know? He doesn't look like a regular contractor." And right there, you could feel the air change. Doors started opening. Phones came out. Curtains shifted. I was standing in the middle of a scene I never auditioned for. Then the black SUV with federal plates turned the corner. 2 agents stepped out, calm, efficient, no small talk. One said, "We received a report of a potential violation." The neighbor immediately pointed at me like she'd been waiting for that moment. The homeowner protested, said this was ridiculous. The agent turned to me and said, "Sir, we need to verify your identity. Please step down and show your documents." I paused for half a second. Not defiance, just understanding. I said, "I'm a citizen." He replied, "We still need to verify." I climbed down slowly. Every movement deliberate, the way you learn to move when authority is watching. I walked to my truck and grabbed the folder I keep for moments I wish didn't exist. License, business registration, insurance, contract, permits. They examined everything photographed. It made calls, and we waited. 20 minutes. 20 minutes of neighbors watching, whispering, filming. 20 minutes of the neighbors smiling like this was exactly how she wanted the morning to go. Finally, one agent nodded and said, "Everything checks out. You're free to continue working." I laughed, just a short sound, and said, "Continue." I asked him if he really thought I could just pick up a brush and act like nothing happened. He said they were responding to a call. I told him it was a discriminatory call. The homeowner's husband, a lawyer, pointed to the security camera and said it was all on video. The agent shifted, apologized for the inconvenience. That word, inconvenience, like I'd just been late for an appointment instead of publicly questioned for existing. That night, I didn't go back to work. I went home and sat in my garage staring at my tools, thinking about how close this comes to happening.